This is a look at the Bosch GRO 12 volt 35. It's their cordless rotary tool which runs on the 10.8 and the 12 volt batteries, and I will be comparing it against my Dremel 8200 which is 10 years old now. Sorry I haven't had a video out for a couple of weeks. I went away for Easter and then last weekend I was busy building a pond. So if we have a quick look at the Dremel. On the Dremel we have a sliding switch to increase your power. We have a battery indication light here, on switch, and the lock to be able to lock the chuck in place when you're changing your bits. The Dremel itself is a little bit wider here than it is on the Bosch, but other than that it's been a lovely little tool. The only disadvantage the Dremel has is the batteries look the same as the 12 volt Bosch ones, but the 12 volt Bosch ones don't fit in the Dremel and vice versa. If we now have a look at the Bosch GRO 12v-35, this runs on the 10.8 and the 12 volt batteries. On the Bosch we have a battery light, and we also have a warning light for the motor. Then we have a rotary dial to change the speed from 1 all the way up to 6. On off switch, and then the same locking mechanism to change the chuck. The battery indicator turns off after a couple of seconds, and then the warning light next to it, if the motor was to jam, it then turns the motor off and flashes the warning light for a few seconds. Then you have to turn the unit back off again and turn it back on. This is a lovely feature as the Dremel keeps running when you pressurize it, whereas this one will actually turn the motor off, so it's not actually straining the motor. Bosch actually own Dremel, so they're actually running the same company. People online have been saying that the Bosch is more powerful than the Dremel. This is true with a caveat. The Dremel runs on a 1.3 amp hour battery, and I would say the Dremel is more powerful than the Bosch with a 1.3 or a 2 amp hour battery. But once you go up to a 3 amp hour battery or higher, then the Bosch is definitely more powerful. If I do a motor speed comparison, you'll be able to hear the difference on the motor. I've taken the attachments out of the tools so you can hear the engine speeds. This Dremel is running on a 1.3 amp hour battery, which is 10 years old now, at full speed. The Bosch is running on a 1.3 amp hour battery, which again is from about 10 years old, at full speed. If we now go up to the 4 amp hour battery at full speed, you can hear the faster speed of the motor compared to the 1.3 amp hour. The battery I'd recommend is the 3 amp hour battery. This battery runs this machine at its optimum speeds. The attachments that you put into the rotary tool are exactly the same as the Dremel. Other than your normal array of attachments that you get for your Dremel tool and you start building up a collection, the 2 attachments that I would recommend is a long shaft. This allows you to use the tool as a pencil tool and gives you finer access to smaller gaps, and it does make it a lot easier to use. When you're doing cutting, the Dremel cutting discs work perfectly. They're a nice fine disc for doing delicate cutting, but they do have a tendency of snapping reasonably easily. So the second attachment I'd recommend getting is the Dremel EZ Speed Click. These cutting discs are slightly thicker so they don't break as easily, and they're fantastic for cutting through most metals. To change the disc, you just literally pull the release lever down underneath and take the unit off, and then to pop it back on again, pull the release lever down and then it locks back into place. The next item I'd recommend getting for either the Bosch or the Dremel is different size collets. You can get them to go from a very small shaft all the way up to a thicker shaft, because not all the shafts are the same size. My attachments vary from 2.4mm shafts all the way up to 3.1mm shafts, so you can't use the same size collet for these two different items. So overall, the Bosch GRO 12v-35 rotary tool, I would recommend it highly. It fits in my hand nicely. I like it that the motor has an auto cut off on it, so if you put too much pressure on it, the motor doesn't carry on burning out. And when you use it on a 3 amp hour battery or higher, then this tool is definitely faster than the Dremel. If you don't have the Bosch 12V battery system already, my opinion is there's not really a great deal of difference between buying the battery operated Dremel if you can get it at a lower price and you only need the one battery. But as a whole system, if you watch my previous videos on the Bosch 12V units, I would recommend going for the Bosch rotary tool, as this works with all the other batteries. I hope this advice was helpful for someone. Thank you for watching and subscribing.